I still hear it sometimes, the knock. 3 sharp, deliberate taps that came from inside the restaurant, when I knew I was the only one there. That night, something came for me. And no matter how far I run, I know it's still waiting. When I got the job as a night security guard at a small family-owned restaurant, I didn't expect anything unusual. The place had been around for decades, a cozy spot that locals loved. But the owners claimed they'd been experiencing strange incidents during the late hours. Things moving on their own, doors unlocking, and odd noises echoing through the halls. They laughed it off when they told me, calling it harmless mischief. I wasn't so sure. My shift was simple. Arrive at 10 p.m., lock the doors, monitor the cameras, and make sure no one broke in. Most nights were calm, almost boring. But the night I'm about to tell you about, it still haunts me. It was mid-November, and the air had that biting chill that clings to your skin. The restaurant had closed at 9 p.m., and by the time I did my initial walkthrough, it was eerily quiet. The kind of silence that makes every little creak and groan feel magnified. As I sat at the desk watching the security monitors, I noticed something strange. The camera pointing toward the dining area seemed blurry, like there was fog or condensation inside the lens. I tapped the screen, thinking it was just a glitch, but then the static began. I leaned closer, trying to make out the shapes on the screen. For a split second, I saw what looked like a figure standing between 2 tables. It wasn't clear, just a faint silhouette, but it was enough to make my stomach drop. When the static cleared, the figure was gone. At exactly 3:07 a.m., the knock came. 3 slow, deliberate taps on the glass window. It startled me so much I nearly fell out of my chair. The sound was loud, sharp, and it seemed to reverberate through the entire restaurant. I grabbed my flashlight and approached the window. My breath fogged up the glass as I shone the light outside. The street was empty, silent except for the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. Then came another knock, but this time, it wasn't on the window. It was on the inside wall, coming from the kitchen. I swung the flashlight around and hesitated. The kitchen was pitch black, with only the faint glow of the emergency exit sign to light the way. I called out, "Whoever's in here, you need to leave. I'm calling the police." No response. I stepped into the kitchen, my boots echoing on the tiled floor. The air was colder here, and it smelled faintly of grease and something rotten. My flashlight flickered, and for a brief moment, the beam caught something at the far end of the room. A pair of eyes. They were too high to belong to a rat, and too reflective to be human. They blinked once, and then vanished as the light steadied. My heart raced, but I told myself it must have been a trick of the light. Back at my desk, I tried to calm myself, but the tension in the air was palpable. As I reviewed the footage from the last hour, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. In the corner of the screen, near the kitchen door, was a shadow. It wasn't moving like a person would. It seemed to stretch and shift, almost as if it were alive. And then, as I watched, it started crawling toward the dining area. Before I could process what I was seeing, I heard it. A soft, raspy whisper. "Why are you here?" The voice was so close. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. But when I turned around, there was no one there. As I tried to regain my composure, I heard a creak. It was the basement door, slowly swinging open. I hadn't touched it all night, and it was supposed to stay locked. The air coming from the basement was damp and freezing. My flashlight barely penetrated the darkness, but I could make out the steps leading down. The whispers grew louder, but now they were layered. Multiple voices overlapping, some laughing, some crying. I tried calling the police, but my phone had no signal. Even the landline at the desk was dead. I was completely alone, or so I thought. I mustered every ounce of courage I had and started down the stairs. Each step creaked beneath my weight, and the whispers seemed to retreat further into the shadows. At the bottom, the smell hit me, a sickly sweet odor, like something had been rotting for weeks. My flashlight flickered again, casting fleeting glimpses of the room. There were piles of debris, old furniture, broken dishes, and something that looked like bones. Small ones, too small to belong to an animal. And then I saw it, the doll. It sat in the middle of the floor, its porcelain face cracked, and its eyes staring directly at me. As I approached the doll, the whispers stopped. The silence was deafening, pressing down on me like a weight. I reached out to pick it up, and the second I touched it, the lights in the basement exploded, plunging me into total darkness. I felt something cold brush past me, followed by a deep, guttural growl. My flashlight sputtered to life just long enough for me to see the entity standing inches from my face. It was tall, emaciated, and its eyes burned with a yellow light. Its mouth twisted into a grin that seemed to stretch too wide for its face. It whispered, "You shouldn't have come here." The moment I saw that thing standing in front of me, my body froze. It was like my brain couldn't process what I was looking at. Its skin was pale and stretched tightly over its bony frame, and its eyes glowed like embers in a dying fire. That smile, it was too wide, like its jaw had been unhinged just to fit it on its face. It tilted its head, as if studying me, and whispered in that guttural, raspy voice, "Why do you run?" I didn't even realize my legs had started moving until I felt the wooden stairs beneath me. I was running, my flashlight bouncing wildly in my hand, the beam illuminating fleeting glimpses of the basement walls. Behind me, I heard the thing move. Its footsteps were irregular, like it was crawling up the walls and floor at the same time. The whispers started again, louder now, overlapping and echoing in my ears. As I reached the halfway point of the stairs, I felt something ice-cold wrap around my ankle. I looked down, and a long, skeletal hand was reaching through the gaps in the steps, its sharp fingers digging into my skin. I screamed and kicked, my flashlight clattering down the stairs and plunging me into almost total darkness. For a second, I thought it was going to drag me back down, but somehow, I managed to pull free. The pain in my ankle was searing, but the adrenaline pumping through my veins kept me moving. I scrambled up the rest of the stairs, barely able to see, and slammed the basement door shut behind me. But the second it closed, the whispers stopped. The sudden silence was somehow worse than the noise. I leaned against the door, panting, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the handle. That's when I realized the door wouldn't lock. The mechanism was broken, the deadbolt useless. And then, from the other side of the door, I heard it. A slow, deliberate scratching sound. I stumbled back from the door, and for a brief moment, I thought I was safe. But when I turned around, the restaurant didn't look the same. The lights were dim and flickering, casting long, distorted shadows across the dining area. The chairs and tables were no longer neat and orderly. They were overturned, some broken, as if something had violently rampaged through the space. Walls were different, too. They were damp and covered in dark stains that dripped down like black tears. I tried to orient myself, to make a run for the exit, but as I moved, the air grew heavy, like I was wading through water. Every step felt sluggish, like something was holding me back. And then I saw it again. The entity was now standing in the center of the dining area, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. It didn't walk this time. It glided toward me, its feet never touching the ground. As it moved closer, the whispers returned, louder than ever. But now, they weren't just coming from around me. They were inside my head. "You can't leave. Stay with us. It's too late." The voices overlapped, growing more frantic, more desperate, until they were shouting in my ears. I dropped to my knees, clutching my head, trying to block them out, but they just kept getting louder. The entity stopped a few feet away from me, its glowing eyes locking onto mine. It raised one long, clawed finger and pointed toward me, as if marking me as its prey. Something in me snapped. I don't know if it was survival instinct or sheer desperation, but I forced myself to my feet and bolted toward the front door. The air seemed to thicken with every step, but I pushed through it, ignoring the burning in my lungs and the pain in my ankle. The entity let out a sound I can only describe as a roar mixed with a screech, and I could feel it closing in behind me. When I reached the door, I slammed into it with all my weight, fumbling with the keys in my pocket. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped them twice before finally jamming the right one into the lock. The door wouldn't budge. I turned back, and the entity was right there, inches from my face. Its mouth was opening wider, impossibly wide, revealing rows of jagged, blackened teeth. It reached for me, and just as its icy fingers grazed my arm, the door flew open. I stumbled out onto the street, falling to my knees on the cold pavement. The air outside was sharp and freezing, but it felt like the sweetest relief after the oppressive atmosphere inside. I turned back toward the restaurant, expecting to see the entity staring back at me. But the windows were dark, and the dining area looked normal again. Clean, quiet, untouched. I sat there for what felt like hours, trembling and gasping for breath. But as I started to calm down, I noticed something. On the inside of the glass door, smeared in what looked like ash, was a handprint. It was too large to be human, and it hadn't been there before. And then, just as I stood up to walk away, I heard it again. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I quit the job the next day. The owners thought I was crazy when I told them what happened. They said there was nothing unusual on the security footage, and the basement was perfectly clean. But I knew what I saw, what I felt. For weeks after, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the entity's glowing eyes, its smile, its outstretched hand. Sometimes, I'd wake up in the middle of the night, certain I heard the whispers again. I moved away, changed jobs, tried to put it all behind me. But even now, when I pass by that street, I can't help but feel like I'm being watched. And sometimes, just sometimes, if the night is quiet enough, I still hear the knock.